Hola community, welcome to another episode of Blender Today, live streaming from the Blender studio, Blender HQ here in Amsterdam. Live. We have, for today, we have I was about to call it the potpourri section because it's like the entire episode because there is everywhere. There is some grease pencil, some cycle stuff, but mainly like mentioning a bunch of different types of hardware for like cycle supports new AMD graphics card, no new, old AMD graphics cards that it didn't before. Some announcements by Intel as well, Intel and Metal. So all over the board. Let's start with some news from the industry. Before we begin, remember this is live. We are streaming live, so go to Blender.Today if you want to leave your questions. There should be a thread there, so leave your questions there. We're gonna be answering towards the end of the show when we go through everything that we see today: cycles, geometry nodes, user interface, KEYMAP changes, color management improvements, UV outliner out for like it's a new image format that Blender supports, curves, grease pencil, VR, and performance and features in the OBJ, FBX, STL, and what else? Like everything. I think I just mentioned everything. So if the audio and video it's okay, give me a thumbs up in the chat, please. And we're gonna jump into the big news. I woke up today. I got a message. It's like, Pablo, you should check this out. So you know what? It's not just when you are buying graphics cards to use with Blender, it's not just going to be just the two options, the two popular options, the NVIDIA and AMD. There is also work being done by Intel to get Blender cycles running on their new GPUs, on their discrete graphics, like actual graphics cards that you're gonna be able to just, use cycles with. It is insane that this is happening nowadays. It's to me, it's the most exciting things when the most exciting side of open source development, when it's no longer just people here at the studio that worry about getting Blender to work on specific hardware, but it's the manufacturers themselves that focus on getting Blender running properly and cycles on their own systems. So it is fantastic. Like, this is completely like even so apparently there's gonna be a new section for some Intel related hardware and a bunch of settings where you can toggle them on and off, and apparently it seems to just work. It's also super fast. In the end, it's rendering this scene in around 7 seconds or so, but also look how responsive the viewport is. So very, very promising. I don't know exactly they don't mention many of the details, but we know that they've been doing this for a while, and they also are the people behind the denoiser, the open image denoise by Intel as well. And they also have other technologies around for graphics, like the XESS, like the super sampler. That one, if you read the comments, it's actually super interesting. They're even replying, mentioning that, yeah, that would be someone mentions that it would be cool to have like a node in the compositor for upscaling, render full HD and upscale to 4K using AI. And they have the tech for that. So wouldn't that be amazing? Anyway, nothing ready to test. It's all preview, but it's super exciting to see more competition in this world of GPUs. So what else? Speaking of more competition with GPU, Apple users, M1 users especially, the Blender.org website, Blender.org/download now is gonna, it should, I couldn't test it. I don't have an M1 here, but at least Francesco tested it on his MacBook and it was working. So if you visit Blender.org on a M1 Mac, it should show by default the Apple Silicon version. Just that. Otherwise, of course, you can always download it from here. But before, we were just defaulting to Intel always, instead of giving you the proper configuration, which is hard to get actually. Someone suggested we could use the code from VLC. They seem to do it when you go to the VLC website, and their website is open source just like ours. So I grabbed that piece of code and it should work. If it works for them, it should work for us. So yay for open source and making their websites open source. I couldn't find a license, although, but I give credits as much as I could. Okay, another thing is that 3.1 is the version that you can download now until Wednesday. And onwards, it's gonna be 3.1.1. The corrected release for the current Blender release is gonna be, it's scheduled for Wednesday, and it's going to contain a bunch of fixes. I already shown some of this in last week's episode, but if you go to the by the way, all the links that I'm seeing are on the description, and if you look at the task that is the potential candidate for corrected releases for 3.1.1, the list is quite extensive already, and most of I don't think that all of them are crash related, but there is a bunch of crash, like 1, 2, 3, 4. There is a number of crashes to be fixed, and some performance improvement even. It's always good to have. It would be great if we didn't have that, but hey, it's good that they're here. How can you prevent for developers to spend time on this? By testing while we are in beta state. We're still not in beta for 3.2. We see how there's some weeks to go. So 1 week or not. How do you know which status Blender is? All right, if you go to 3.2 to the current project, here you can get some of the dates, and the date we care about is March 30. Actually 2 days for Beacon 2 and an official release. It's like fashion, it moves too fast. Okay, let's jump. That was the last mention that I had in the... Oh yeah, the billboard. While you're here in the... I changed the colors of this. It's a small detail. But in the billboard, you may have noticed also the website changed a little bit. If it looks broken, just try to hard refresh the page, Ctrl+Shift+R or something. Yeah, there's not much new other than you can actually click on the hash. For example, you want to know what's new in 3.2 alpha, like details. I want details. Well, you can always go to latest changes, and you're gonna see the wiki page of the releases. So those are the ones that are more like properly written. But if you want to know the details, exactly what changed is in that version, you can click on the hash, and it's going to take you to the history, so you can see all the changes up to that one version. So in this case, the last one was something to do with OBJ. It's actually a performance improvement that I'm going to mention later on the show, but yeah, you can follow exactly what has changed, which is super neat. Well, you can also do that with 3.1.1. Yeah, cool. You can do it with all of them. It just works. All right, time to move back to Firefox and Linux. I'm using Firefox because I mentioned last week that Chrome had something weird. I cannot listen to audio. I cannot at home, in Linux at home. Anyway, we shall begin with the show. Cycles. We've been talking about cycles. Well, this new is not directly to end users now, but it's for users or of people that are fans of cycles and use other software. Well, cycles now is what is called a Hydra render delegate. So Hydra is a viewport. It's made by Pixar and Disney. Pixar. The viewport is the fact that cycles is a Hydra viewport delegate. It means that they can work together. So in this commit, you can see, well, the implementation details, how to compile it, but it is much more technical. But if you go into the details themselves, you can see that of the task themselves, you can see what is supported at the moment and what does it even mean. For example, 3.1 is supporting 3.2 alpha, 3.1 is supporting 3.2 alpha, 3.2 alpha 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 applications that provide a Hydra viewport, such as USD View, NVIDIA Omniverse, or even Houdini has a Hydra viewport, right? So that means that in the future, technically, cycles could run there. There is a task where you can see the progress that everything that it has been ported over or not. And it's pretty much almost there. I think motion blur, display driver, some details, but exciting. I mean, it's not exciting for users at the moment, but in the future, for example, if cycles can work on Houdini, it means like suddenly Blender cycles becomes used by a lot more people, and now those people and developers can contribute to to cycles that benefits everyone. So having an open source engine getting in those big boys, it's quite a big deal. Sir, are you Russian? No, I'm from Argentina. Do I sound Russian? And cycles. Another change for AMD users of Vega and Vega 2 Radeon 7 GPUs. Well, it's the support for these graphics cards has been enabled on Windows so far. We need some testing on Linux as well once the Linux support is enabled. But so far, it's here. So has anybody tested it though? Because basic testing on Windows works so far. So basic testing, we believe, Brian, you've done some basic testing, but the big testing comes from the community. And remember, just like I said at the beginning, the more you test, the better it is for everyone. The better it is for the bugs to get fixed and they don't make it to an corrective release later after the main release. So that means developers can spend time actually fixing and working on new features instead of releasing a whole new Blender. All right, let's continue. Features themselves. Well, this is a fix / improvement to make cycles renders easier to composite. So the change is very small, actually comes from a bug fix from a bug report. So the change is that in shadow catcher objects, the light passes are not going to be written to it. So that way it makes it easier to composite the combined image from these passes. It comes from a bug report, so it's super interesting to see these. I always like to see the work behind the commit. You know, that's something I share here in the live streams. I don't know if it's interesting for everyone, but it shows the process behind just a commit, just a change, how many people have been involved in this decision, and you can see the reasoning behind some of those changes. Always good to see. Okay, speaking of good stuff, let's people wait. Thank you, Brian. I am about to ruin your whole month. Okay, someone's gonna get serious with testing. I like that. Okay, I like it, Picasso. Next. All right, let's talk about a little bit about geometry nodes. And I'm gonna get here. I don't know if you get to hear the music, but for me it's relaxing. I get this comfort feeling, you know, with their ears covered. Okay. This is an improvement on performance vertex groups when writing to vertex groups. Well, this changed my hands on geometry nodes, improved performance writing to vertex groups. So there another improvement that comes from a bug report. So there is in this bug report, there seems to be a regression on using the delete geometry node from 3.01 to 3.1. So the discussion goes on about the reasonings behind this, why it has been done, which commit made a change. So the improvement here, actually, it is related to it, but it doesn't bring it back to the performance. So the regression is not solved yet. However, it seems like if ever gets fixed, or when it gets fixed, it will come with more improvements. I like to see how sharing blend files that show a specific issue can even, you know, shed some light in other areas. The improvements seems to be 3.6 about about 3.6 times. Delete geometry nodes went from 82 to 23 milliseconds, and writing to vertex groups in other cases should be faster too. So even though in this case for the delete geometry node, this improvement also affects writing to vertex groups in other cases. So that is that's even better. The bug report is on one node and the improvement is on many. Next, multi-thread creation of selection from field. So selection from field, like Boolean attributes. While the processing, it was single-threaded. And now by making it multi-threaded, for example, in the set position node, with the random value node set to the Boolean mode on a Ryzen 2700X, the improvement is around 1.4 times when only 10% of the points are selected, and about 2.5 times. So the seems to be like the more parts are selected, the better. So it went from 115 milliseconds to 45 milliseconds. So that is about 2.5 times faster. Is there noise in the background? It's not ton. It's the window that I have open because it's really warm. So if the noise continues, let me know. I have noise cancelling here, so I should add noise cancelling to this. And I don't think there is a compressor now. Let me know if it's too bad. I can just get naked and close the window. Okay. That was it for geometry nodes. Let's see some UI changes, some user interface improvements in there. And 3D view. Well, this is UI / UX / like clicking around the interface. So ever notice that every time when you clicked on objects for selecting them, if you click and then do something else and then click again, it will select whatever is behind instead of just always selecting first and then jumping to the next selection, which makes it what you would expect, right? Like first time you click, you want to select. The feature by Campbell says order by depth when selecting cycles through objects. Nothing to do with the render engine. Selecting when cycling through objects, select the nearest first instead of using the order of object bases in the view layer. So it's actually gonna use the depth, whatever is closer to the mouse to where you click, it's gonna be selected. Yay for selection improvements. Another one, well, I have a few others in the KEYMAP section. Let's go through some of the visual changes in the or not. Let's talk about it because there is also outliner changes. While we were talking about keymaps, maybe mention this one. Experimental preference. There is a bunch of experimental features lately in the keymap selection, and experimental means please go test it. Go test it and provide feedback. The experimental features can be enabled in Blender whenever you go to the preferences. You have interface, developer extras on, and then experimental. You're gonna see here a whole bunch of projects and features. For example, select the nearest on first click. That's what I mentioned before, that instead of selecting whatever order it was when it was created in the view layer, now it's gonna select whatever is closer to the mouse. Basic stuff, but it needs testing. So please go enable it, and if you see something weird, that is no good. This was already a preference for the tweak tool. This preference enables the option for all selection in the 3D view and the UV editor. So the setting is called mouse select and move. So it will select and move at the same time. The other change is a preference, an experimental preference for the 3D view to disable selection cycling on the first click. So again, the same object mode selection does a kind of cycling that exclude the active selected object. It is separate from regular selection cycling, which is enabled when clicking multiple times without moving the cursor. So as long as you don't move the cursor, it will just cycle based on depth of whatever object is under the mouse. Some of these changes also have to do more with right click select selection, by the way, or when you are using a pen. Okay, let's now let's talk a little bit about the other. Today we talked about AMD, we talked about Intel. Let's talk about Metal. So the bare bones, the basics of Metal implementation backend for GPU module. So everything that you see in the viewport, basically in Blender in the UI, has been added. So the very basics are there, but it's so exciting to see that it's making its way into it is master. So it's inside of Blender. There is a setting now when you compile Blender that it enables it or not, but super cool, super cool. There is more. Is there noise in the background? Yes. Okay, I hope that's better. I'm gonna start sweating in 5, 4, 3. Okay, make GLSL shader source MSL compliant as well. More improvement. If you want to read the entire list, it's quite long and it's work in progress. So far there is 2 options ticked, but yeah, Metal viewport, exciting for anybody using all Metal, Apple. Next, let's talk a little bit about color management. There is a new setting for color management that allows you to pick a different settings for render and for compositing. Isn't that amazing? So you can render with one and then composite and export with a different color space. So you can do all your color space magic in the compositor. The output properties has a new color management subpanel to override these scene settings. When set to override instead of follow scene, the settings are open for OpenEXR. If you choose a linear color space for RGB passes, and for other file formats, you can use a different display, view, look, exposure, and gamma. So there was no noise. Okay, if I get too warm, I'm gonna start undressing slowly. But yes, this is super cool. Exciting. People are excited in the chat. Yes, color management. It is exciting, right? 2 different settings. I wish we could have that for images and videos as well. For example, something that people report very often is that if you have if you have your settings saved to FFmpeg, like a video for export, and then you're saving an image, then yeah, you have to set it every time if you want to set it to JPEG or so. That's super annoying. I hope one day that can be tackled. The other section, let's jump into the UVs. Yeah, there are improvements for the UV editor. One related to one we already talked about KEYMAP, but this one to me is the most interesting one. It's related to UDIMs. So improve tile format detection in file names. What does it mean? Well, examples. If you have a file name that was test 1001 version something, Blender will guess wrong since it uses the image sequence detection code, which finds the first sequence from the end. It will guess the UDIM from at the end of the string, the file name. But now it's much more reliable. It's gonna the user can fix this step afterwards, but it would be nicer if it will detect properly in the first place, and that's what it does. So thank you, Deadpin Jesse, for working on it. Better auto detection of file names, of UDIMs in file names. The other improvement in the UV editor is the tweak tool. Now there is an option for left mouse select and move, so you can click and move in one go instead of clicking and then moving. So same as it was implemented in the viewport recently. Okay, This is not related to UV. This is more like modifiers. The complex solidify modifier now handles vertex creases. So implement the same interpolation method as for bevel weights for creases as well. These are the results possible when using the patch. So yay for creases in the solidify. The next improvement in another modifier is that the bevel segments setting was limited to 100, and apparently that's not enough. The limit was just so the computer wouldn't like die as soon as you start changing those values. The range was up to 1000, although I think it would be better if this was it still was 1 to 100 the soft range, and then 1 to 1000 the hard range. So if you want to go nuts, go nuts. But when moving the slider, then it means that now, let me test this with the bevel modifier. So segments, no, I think we should change that. As you know, the thing with the limits is that there's two limits, right? The soft limit, which is the one for the UI, and there is the hard limit, which is the one that it's like the actual limit. And the reason to have a soft limit or UI limit is so first, you don't go into crazy values, and also to make the sliding a bit more precise, right? Because now this slider goes from 0 to 1000. So when I move it slightly a little bit, then it's not great. It's not great, especially if you're with the pen and you just want to slide it a little bit. I usually input this manually. It's just very decided. Okay, 3, 4, but 1000. Anyway, what do you guys think? It should be soft limit, hard limit. The outliner. Let's talk a little bit about the outliner. I didn't press the... Okay, let's do outliner. So outliner nowadays, with all the improvements that it's getting, is mostly a synonym of library overrides. Everything in the library overrides is being managed. It's going to be managed by the outliner. So there is a bunch of fixes in those areas. Just small fixes. I wanted to mention this one because it's the user interface. Last week, I showed a screenshot about the new mode in the outliner where you can see all the library overrides. And there was just 1 pixel offsets that were wrong. And Julian went ahead and fixed them. So thank you for the 1 pixel fixes on Tuesday, the next day. So thank you for that, Julian. You're awesome. Okay, now to the actual real features and not just the nitpicking. Outliner, don't display library overrides from linked files. This used to be the default. It would show library overrides for current file and linked files all in one place, and it could get very noisy. It's rather better to have either a hierarchy section or maybe filters for those, but it was just adding noise, as you based on feedback, user feedback, mostly want to have the overrides on the current file. Otherwise, it's impossible to navigate. Although I think it should be a filter. What else? Remove the list of library overrides for general display modes. Library overrides were showing pretty much everywhere in other display modes. Now they are removed from there, so more can go into the library overrides and have like a dedicated place for those. Again, maybe a filter or maybe a dedicated place is better, because if you have a view that it's dedicated, you can have its own menus, its own header, its own buttons, everything, compared to just a filter. The other improvement is that empty base elements like collections or objects, when they're empty, they're not going to show up anymore. Small detail, but it adds to removing the noise that doesn't help. You know what helps? To have more or better image formats available. So the popular WebP format an open source format, is now available in Blender. You can save your images, no animation yet, but images, single frames are now possible to save with Blender. So that gives about 35% of file save when resaving the splash screen, for example, and also much faster. It's up to 15 times faster than PNG with a better compression ratio. So yay for that. Known issues. macOS support. In theory, should work. Unsure about Mac on ARM. Please give feedback. Does it work? Does it doesn't work? Feedback. The black and white color mode support doesn't have a specific grayscale encoder. Interesting. Is people still saving? Well, I guess if you make some specific maps that you want to use only black and white. But exciting nonetheless. New format. Well, it's not new. Format has been around for ages. It's cool that Blender can handle them now. Does it also work in the... Gee, this patch was from 2015. It's only 7 years old. Well. Okay, so that's dedication. You know, you work on something for so long. Thank you, Aaron, for working on this. All right. You know, this next section has a bunch of features. Grace Pencil has had a load of improvements everywhere, existing new modifiers and even new modifiers. So let's see this one. Dash Modifier. Lower bounds for gap in the Dash Modifier. Again, bounds limits, the limits of the sliders. Now the values are lower, so this patch maximizes the possible bounds for the dash and the gap parameters in the .dash modifier. For example, you can chop up lines without gaps possible. So no picture, no nothing. I was about to go all mad to the chat. It's like, hey guys, can we have some pictures? But first I went to the wiki and wiki.blender.org and then release notes, 3.2 alpha, Grace Pencil, and there it was. So nice. There is a bunch of, well, this one in particular doesn't have images, but there's images for the other features that I have here to show you, such as the cyclic flag on the .dash modifier. So what does it mean? It's cyclic. It's gonna close each gap and it's gonna make it close to where it began. So for example, if the gap goes around and it's curved, then it will cyclic, will make it close. I guess if you mix it with some smoothing, maybe you could get some interesting effects. Also, it makes it more look like a scribble. So yay for that. Another change was this one I'm not totally sure. It's called Scale Stroke Thickness is now visible in the pie menu. So when you, I think the inspiration of this feature is that when you're in object, when you're in object mode, you know, have a bunch of objects that you want to move, and for example, you want to rotate. Well, in the pie menu for the pivot point, where you can choose what to use as pivot, there is this option called Only Locations, which is going to, when you, for example, if I rotate, now all the objects keep their rotation and scale, and I'm only changing their location. In Blender 2.7 used to be a dot next to the pivot point. Now, where is it? Okay, here's the pivot point. I remember having, there was a button here. Anyway, now it's in a pie menu, but it should be in other places. Please, if you see this, let me know where it is. It's not in options. Strange. Anyway, if it's only in the pie menu, that's really bad, and you should go. There you go. Locations. That's it. Yes. Affect only locations. I saw it here. Although this is much more discoverable, but this also makes you affect. I guess it makes sense. This setting you can enable from a pie menu, which is a bit weird because we don't have many cases where you can toggle settings on and off from here. I think the X-ray is available there, but in the Grease Pencil version is called Scale Stroke Thickness in a pivot point. Why would you disable scaling on a pivot point? I don't know. I don't have enough experience with Grease Pencil. Let me know if it doesn't make sense to you. Okay, the other feature is a new modifier. It's called Envelope Modifier. Again, I think it's nothing to do with the envelope that we know from armatures, where it's like an area around the bones. Nothing to do with that. It's just a type of shape that gives you this kind of thing. You know, when it's great for making this effect, like it closes from when you're painting. It closes to the nearest points, and it makes it. There was a tool online, or I think it was Alchemy, an open source software that had this by default in their pens, and it was super cool. So yeah, basically you can do this kind of stuff, this kind of like almost shading. So super nice, super neat. There's a few settings for spread length, thickness, strength, and you can even assign a different material index, so the lines will have a different material altogether. The next, it's not a new modifier, it's just an improvement on an existing modifier, the smooth operation. So this one, this patch by Henrik, by the way, these patches are by Henrik. It's been on a Sunday at almost midnight. I don't know which zone are you, but yeah, that's hardcore. Midnight Sunday. You know, when you have to do homework from Monday. Okay, this patch addresses a few remarks in the code. So there is actually a bunch of changes in this improvement, overall improvement. One, it's now symmetric, so it's better. It's what you would expect. It supports much more many iterations, up to 1000 iterations, and includes all the smooth operations. And there is a new option called Keep Shape, so it's not so smooth anymore. You can smooth and just don't preserve the shape, but also keep it. So like a adaptive, if you want it. And then it also improved performance. You would expect all these new features to have like a cost and performance, but no, actually it is faster. How much faster? Well, in this case, for example, in milliseconds, the 100 iterations of the old method would take around 45 milliseconds, and the new one with 200 iterations, so even more, with the new system takes less time, takes 33.8 milliseconds. So pretty neat. Not only new features but also faster. So thank you for working on that, Henrik. And there is even another improvement, small one, by Lichtek Steven. He made it so it's not related to Grease Pencil directly, it's more on the annotation. So the annotation list of annotations now has a toggle for X-ray, so allows you to, by default, all the annotations draw on top of of every object, and so you can see them because they are annotations, right? You want on top. But now there is a setting per layer that allows you to disable that annotation from being on top of everything, and allows you to put it back so you can be under some objects. Super nice. And it's also, if you look at the patch, it's nothing. It's just like one line for setting the icon and the other one for just showing the feature. I guess because this feature is already in Grease Pencil, so I guess, and the code for annotations and Grease Pencil is pretty much shared, so yay for that. Let's change topic. Let's go into a potpourri section. So potpourri section, all of these changes are in mainly, no, they're not in add-ons, but this one is in add-on. VR. There's a new operator that creates a new camera and a custom object from your pose, from your headset pose. So it's called Camera Landmark from Session. So you are with your headsets, you set whatever you want to the camera to be. You run this operator and it's going to create a new camera with a custom object there in that one position. Super nice for, yeah, easily and more, much faster setting your cameras, your landmarks everywhere. Just go to a place, save, go to another place, save with the camera view. All right. Let's talk about exporters. First, OBJ. OBJ. It's now faster, much faster. How much faster? Well, depends on the system. On Windows, seems to be around 20% faster. The test actually is done in multiple operating systems, which is pretty neat. It's on Windows, on Mac OS, on Apple M1 Max, and on Linux. The list of improvements is on top of the already existing from 3.1, and there is in the wiki some comparisons that go that compare 3.2, so the current export of OBJ, with 3.1, so the latest release. So 3.1 was already much faster than 3.0 when the exporter went from Python in 3.0 to C++, and now it's even faster. How much faster? Well, on Windows, a export that took around 6 seconds is now 1 second. On Mac OS, something that took around 4 seconds is now 1 second, 1.2. And on Linux, again, from 6.2 seconds to 1.4. So pretty neat. And it seems that Mac OS wasn't that slow at the beginning, but now it's around the same speed as the rest. Well, macOS also has the least amount of threads, but with with less threads, it can do just as fast almost. Well, faster than others. That's some pretty good use of your threads, macOS. Good for you. Imagine if you had 48 or more. And the other test with the Blender 3.0 splash scene went from 45 seconds to 4 seconds on Windows. macOS from 27 seconds to 5. And on Linux from 33 seconds to 4. That's crazy. That is pretty crazy. Especially because they all have different number of threads. And even though Linux was the faster, has the most amount of threads, it wasn't that much faster. Again, macOS with only 10 threads can do a much better job. It's crazy. It also makes you think the amount of headaches the developers have to go through to make one software work in multiple platforms. Imagine if they only had to focus on one. Imagine. Only Blender for Linux. Imagine. The user count will plummet. Okay. The next improvement is in FBX. So raise your hand if you use FBX. The exporter now has a new option, which is called Triangulate Faces. It's already this option was already in other exporters such as OBJ, but now it's available in FBX. I like the comment by Samuli Raivio is that, hey, I saw that the export was missing, so I was just thinking, it could be added. And yeah, it's really useful, and then it adds a new option. And if you look at the code, again, this is something that without having to know the entire code of Blender, or just knowing a little bit of Python and a bit of the Python API, so any add-on creator out there could have looked into this and improve it. And if you look at the code, again, it's very minimal, just mostly about adding the setting to multiple places to the operator, but using options that are already in Blender, like bmesh, op, triangulate. So it's not that you have to make the entire setting, it's just exposing it. So encourage developers to implement these settings into Blender itself. Just look at the code. Okay. Another change in oh, actually, I skipped one change in OBJ. There is this is a fix. It's a bug fix, but apparently it was very annoying because the new OBJ exporter was no longer grouping faces by material, which was the case before. and in some software it would get a bit annoying, such as Procreate, because we end up with a list that wasn't sorted, or it wasn't grouped. So it's now fixed. There's also a bunch of other fixes in other areas of the OBJ exporter. So if you had any issues last week, make sure you check it out this week, or wait. I think this one even made it to 3.1. I think it did it it made it to 3.1. So that way you can, potential candidates. So okay, so that will be fixed in the in 3.1 release. And last but not least, the STL export now has a new option called global space. It's not an option, it's a matrix that is available in the STL exporter, and it's not exposed to the UI. It's intended for script authors that are making their own scripts to export content. So I don't know why it wouldn't be exposed, but I don't know enough to argue with that. All right, let's jump into the questions. I think it's not too late. I am a bit extra warm today. I hope no, but there is noise outside, so I cannot open the window. Let's go to Blender.Today, the website, the community behind this show. Let's see if it works on Firefox first. A handshake with CDN delivery. Oh, interesting. All right, goodies for everyone. Let's see. The first question. How many? 11. Okay, let's try to answer all of them. Let's start by the one with the most votes. Please help me with these user interface things Blender did since I 3.0. Help me with these user interface things. Who needed this semi-opaque bar, which was not till 2.9? Please show me how to remove it. Almost make me nauseous. What is it? The flipping. Oh, you mean the transparency? The transparency can be changed from the theme. If you go to the theme in U3D viewport, you should be able to change the header background and header alpha. So basically that's it. And region, or it's somewhere here. Just make everything opaque. Next. Currently, the Blender outliner only sorts objects either alphabetically. Hi, by the way. Kitty. Kidding, I'm teasing. Only sort objects either alphabetically or in the order they added to a collection. How hard is it to implement manual sorting? Actually, there was a, don't you think it's great to sort them just by dragging up and down the hierarchy? Question mark, exclamation mark. We can already rearrange modifier. Why not apply some objects to, please Blender? Okay, so I have good news and bad news. The good news is that there was a patch and there was intentions to fix this really long time ago when the outliner was getting all these improvements in 2.8 and 2.9. However, the one showstopper was that it's not so simple with sorting this kind of stuff with in bones. So sorting bones wasn't straightforward, was just headaches because of relations between bones and so on. And that was a showstopper. I would personally prefer to have sorting limited to objects, at least all the objects, you know, but except armature, bones inside of an armature, but at least have it. I agree. I hope maybe we can revisit that and just live with the fact that bones cannot be sorted for the time being, but at least objects. Polyfjord says, Hola Pablo, the principal BSDF has a lot of great documentation in the Blender manual, but there's currently no meaningful mouse over text on the node in Blender. It only says input value for unconnected socket for all the sockets. How can an idiot like me help? The information is there in the Blender manual, but I don't know anything about coding. Cheers from Norway. Well, cheers to Norway. The if you don't know anything about coding, then yeah, maybe you can't really help that much at the moment, because it's a limitation of the system. It's not just yeah, it's not just limited to that it wasn't that there is missing people to write the tooltips. It's just the system itself. In geometry nodes, things got a lot better, with sockets being able to have some more meaningful tooltips. Even like even when it's not connected, it tells you. But there is at least some kind of description. There is some even on inputs, so you can see the values. And with this in mind, in this case, in the case of geometry nodes, it was easier. I don't know why it wasn't implemented in shading. I guess it has its limitations, but maybe it is possible. I don't know. But either way, like when you drop it here, when you mouse over, the same with the geometry nodes actually. If you mouse over some of these values, you see there's no way to get that. It says input value used for unconnected socket. Super useful. But the socket itself has a tooltip. So yeah, the limitation seems to be somewhere else. Apparently it's not a walk in the park to do so without knowing any coding. I'm sorry, Polyfjord, but the only thing you can do and I can do at the time being is just keep asking for it. Although I know developers have tried, many times you think it's like, why is it not done? And actually it was tried and attempted, and I bet many times when we talk about these things, there must be, I bet, because this was brought up many times, there must be developers like maybe watching at the show and then going into and trying to fix this thing, and then they go discover that it's a big spider web of stuff that it would demand a complete rewrite, maybe breaking Blender or so on and so forth. So yeah, when you see things like that, sometimes it happens that it was just an oversight. But yeah, sometimes it's just very hard to do. Ocular Evolution asks, hey Pablo, hope you had a wonderful week. I did, and we'll have yet another one as well. I had the weather here, and now we are 1 hour. We have 1 more hour of daylight. Adding manifold text. My question is regarding to this. Adding manifold next event estimation sampling technique. So also known as caustics, right? Which is celebrated a lot. So this was something that seemed to be building momentum fast, and it was exciting to see it possibly getting implemented soon. But for some reason, since the 9th of March, seems to have gone quiet. Any development updates? Having this release even as a work in progress render kernel will be great. Even though it's currently only good for refractive caustics, it already looks absolutely incredible in terms of what it's capable of and the speed at which it achieves it. It also continues to find out the experimental builds. If the experimental builds, they are removed after a while, so maybe it wasn't, it's not there anymore. It just needs to be triggered again. But this can happen for many reasons. Like this developer Olivier, I don't know exactly, I'm not familiar with his work before, but I think the excitement is visible and people are excited for this. But yeah, there must be reasons behind it. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly the reasons behind, but you can see people engaged with this, so there must be work going on. Let's see. If I fix a bug, the argument to the matrix inversion is the inverted matrix. So I'll take a look at the motion blur issues reported, though I haven't experienced any crash so far. So you see, there's people working on it, and sometimes these things take time. Life, on March 9, the world was a different place as well. So yeah, let's continue give support and love to what the developers are doing, and see that there is work being done behind the scenes. Hey Pablo, with Blender, will Blender modeling, animation, and sculpting get attention again? So basically everything, animation is getting some attention. Sculpting, we're gonna get, when? Today? Tomorrow? The new sculpt vertex colors in master. This is under review at the moment, so we might get news on that soon. And modeling, well, modeling, unfortunately, I don't know anybody that is actively working on that for the, like, at the moment. What is exactly a feature that it's missing for modeling that is not already tackled by any other tool? But yeah, unfortunately, the modeling section, other than modifiers, has been really stale. There's not many developers that really enjoy working on that, and maybe the features that are already there are enough. Although I know, like, the last time a big feature was added, the extrude that it will destroy. That one was gonna get a fix because it doesn't work on every case. Didn't hear from it again, unfortunately. Okay, how many more questions we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's do 5 more, and then I cut here because I'm already super warm with the window closed. I noticed Eevee next. Hello, Erito, Cayo. I noticed Eevee next appeared in the experimental tab 3.2. What's the progress on that? I've been holding off rewriting some complex NPR shaders in case it comes out and I need to do another rewrite. No rush, take your time. Yes, this is like bare bones. The name is there. If you enable, you can't, yeah, if you enable the developer extras and then enable Eevee next, and then you close Blender, and then you open it again, you're gonna see that there is a new render engine that does absolutely nothing. There's nothing implemented. I think the monkey, the grease. Oh wow, now it doesn't. It used to leave a trail. Now this has been fixed. Oh my gosh. But yeah, that was a fun part. Now there's not much, and if you want to know the progress, you can go to devtalk.blender.org. In there, you're gonna find the Eevee next thread under Blender development, and a thread where the developer Clema shares the progress, what it's there, what it's not, and what it's the minimum requirements. Let's see. Next. Jenda Beck says, hello Pablo, I can have 3 simple questions on a single topic, hopefully quickly to reply. Do you know whether fast sculpting and painting in Eevee will make it to 3.2? Yes, it's under review. It should be in any time as long as it passes the review, but the goal is to be there before Wednesday, because Wednesday is when Beacon 2, the phase in Blender development where no new features, big new features are allowed, only fixing or adding, complementing those features that were added in Beacon 1. Now we're Wednesday entering Beacon 2, so you're gonna see a bunch of new things this week, so tune in next week. Can we expect the same performance improvement for weight paint? Not out of the box, but you should, because it's painting and vertex painting, and weight paint is just the same. So you should, like, you're just painting a different value. Is there any chance original vertex paint mode remains? Yes, I believe it will remain for the time being, but like both will coexist. And then eventually will be renamed, I believe. That was the outcome of the last meeting, but I need to be sure. I need to check. Yeah, basically because there's no time to replace it completely, so better just keep it around and just keep both. I miss the UI and features specific to the vertex paint workflow, like weak polygon, vertex masking using right-click selection, face corner painting, mask from edit mode, etc. Yes, that's why it will be kept around until it's feature parity. Hi Pablo, thank you for the great show. Thank you, Rob. Since a few weeks, I am busy trying to understand the data that is generated by the Blender Open Data benchmark tools. I have a lot of questions about it, but the main question is what Blender tried to accomplish with this tool. Apart from the Blender Open Data webpage, is there some info somewhere with more info about the data model, for example. Can I contribute somehow to this project as a data analyst? Absolutely. Blender, you know, like everything in Blender is open source. If you go to opendata.blender.org, you can read more about, I don't know exactly what is the question itself, like you want to understand the data model, like the full model. Well, if you have any, well, I'm not logged in. Let's see if I'm logged in here. I am logged in. So in my benchmarks, I should see some of my benchmarks, and in there you can click, you're gonna see the raw data, and this is everything. This is everything that was sent by Blender, the scenes, the timestamp, the render, and the stats for each one. So you get the samples per minute for each one of the scenes, the total render time, number of samples that managed to render, the time limit that was set, and how much time per for the samples was allocated. You can see everything. If you want to help, well, in about, you're gonna see the reasoning behind it, like what Blender considers to be open data and what is the project itself. In the future, we wanted to have everything there, like Blender downloads, Blender, I don't know, not usage because Blender doesn't have telemetry, but the everything that is related to Blender, like even the development fund income and anything number related in open data. If you want to learn more, go to the about page, but also you can check the actual project in the, let's see if I can find it, because samples is this. If you go to there is no direct link, but we should link directly here. You're gonna find it on developer.blender.org. Under if you search for open data, you're gonna see that it's a project, and in the project you can find everything. You can find the code underneath, so where if you know a bit of coding, you're gonna learn more about the model, the data model, and how it's made. But also in there you're gonna find the there's a thread on DevTalk for feedback and ideas, and I believe there is even a channel on Blender chat. Not exactly sure, but if you want to collaborate, get in touch with Francesco or just jump into the channels that I mentioned. Okay, continue. Let's continue. How many questions? It's we're already super late. Okay, two more questions. Wow, long ones. Okay. How about a node for geometry nodes which reads tables, for example CVS? Actually, someone made a prototype of that. It didn't make it, but there was a prototype. I saw it on Twitter. So someone worked on it. Hey Pablo, how's it going? If I'm not wrong, in 293 there was a really nice UX feature added, which was simple button on the viewport to lock the camera, but then 293 was released, it was removed. Why? It was actually one of the better UX improvements I've seen in a while. The current method of locking the camera is okay, but it's so hidden that when the new user tries. Yes, let me get back to that. Also, what happened to the high poly mode described in the asset creation pipeline blog post? High poly mode. That was just an idea. It didn't went to anywhere, and the developer that wrote that is no longer involved directly in the development of this in particular. Also, the current method for UV unwrap is to be in edit mode. Why can't we unwrap in object mode? Because if there is a heavy object in the viewport or there are multiple objects, going to edit mode can slow things down, or even though I don't know the exact limitations why it can be in object mode. I guess you also need access to the object has to be editable, and it's once you are in edit mode it's just much easier, also because it relies on the selected faces. But yeah, I guess it could do all the faces if you're in object mode. I don't know exact details for that. The current method for UV unwrap is to be in it. Yes, I went through this. Also, what is the logic for having nodes on top of the render in the compositor. Not only I've never seen anything like that in any software, but also neither the shader editor node nor GeoNodes editor work like that. I really don't know what's the point, and I know I can edit the workspace to use an image viewer to work in that way if some nodes don't function properly, like the sunbeam that uses a widget to work properly. What is the logic for having nodes on top of the render in the viewport? It's just another way. It's just the same way you can have in the node in the sequencer. You can also have a backdrop, like you can have the preview as a backdrop. It's just similar. You know, you can have the image under this. This is even worse. Like, is there anybody using this, using the image in behind the sequencer? But yeah, the same way. If you want to do compositing and you don't want to use the backdrop image, just use the image editor, image, and then viewer node, and then you have the viewer node. You can hide the header, and it's just like you would expect it. What else? That's it, I think. Oh no, the first question I didn't reply, I think, right? Yes, I mentioned this in the live stream before. Like the reason it was removed, this was because it was a different type of, like, the buttons here. So for people that don't know, for a while in master there was a setting that if you are in the in the camera view, there was a lock icon here that would basically toggle the what is it, view, this camera to view. So it happens that when you move the camera, you're basically moving the camera. When you move the view, you're moving the camera, which so to make it more obvious, so if you're moving around the viewport, you see the camera underneath is moving, and that in particular is a completely different type of operation than just the view. Here, anything that I do, moving, rotating, and changing the camera view, it's not changing data at all. Like once this thing is changed, so here all these settings, they don't change any data. I can just freely move around. I'm not doing anything destructive. But the lock icon it's a change in a property of an object that can mess up your scene. So it didn't make sense that it looked exactly the same as these buttons. It should be different. It should be just basically it needed some UI work. Having the same, also the icon was different than this icon. This is our one type of icon, and these are other types of icon, and it just didn't look right. It was the lock. It just needed work. For example, if you're in the camera view and you lock in, then the other buttons should be like a hierarchy, right? The lock maybe should be on top. So when you do this, you know that you are changing the camera underneath. Also, like, this is a toggle in and out. It's not related to the lock. So why would it? Anyway, UI. If you have a better, if you have a proposal on how that feature could come back, I think everybody agrees that we should bring back that feature. It was pretty handy to have it there, but also other features that could be part of the viewport. I think maybe the zoom, the lens, the length, the focal length, or depth of field, or lock. There are reasons. There are more options that we can add there. Anyway, I think it's too late. I'm super warm in here, so I need to cut this here, and I'm already 1 hour 15 minutes. Gee. Okay, next. No, there's no next. There is just the next week, and need to move the camera. I think I've been hiding behind the screen all this time, but the microphone doesn't get too far. Okay, there. The show has come to an end. Let's meet again next week. There is going to be some new stuff, because as I mentioned, Beacon 1, the phase in Blender where everything is open for new features, it's about to come to an end. So Wednesday is the limit for new features which is when developers are rushing in and adding, not rushing, but whatever feature was nearly done and ready to go in master, it's gonna make it to master, because then there is another month of Beacon 2, which is improving on those features that were added during Beacon 1. And then after that, there is like another month or so with just bug fixes. And then there is the release. When those bug fixes, the Beacon 3 starts, is when the alpha for Blender 3.3 will begin, which is an LTS release. It's crazy we are talking about this already. Okay, time to wrap it up. Thanks for staying until the end. I'm gonna see you again next week, same place, same time, for another episode of Blender Today Live. Yeah, same place, same time. We already had the time shifting, warping of summertime. So exciting. See you next week, same place, same time.